right, so you're back. You're back for video number 2 with me and Adam Does Dirt Bikes. If you guys are here from the first one, if you watched the first one, you kind of know what it's all about. If you're new, you didn't see the first one, definitely go back and check out the first video, and then come back here and check this video out. We're just going to be continuing to talk more about suspension, more about bikes, more about things. And at the end of this one, we get into a little more personal stuff, which means a lot to me. It has a lot to do with who I am, where I am right now in my life, the shop, a lot of things I'm doing. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Here we go.
Getting the gears in my head really turning, and I'm really trying to, like, it's nice to actually see it taken apart. It's making more sense of how the fluid all flows, but I think I'm gonna have to sit on this and read up on it a little bit more to completely understand, but just being able to see it, that's gonna help out a lot. But yeah, like Morgan said, like having all that data to be able to set the bike up for the type of riding that you do and your weight, and yeah, it's that's pretty big. And going to somebody that has all that data, you're gonna get a much better setup.
Oh yeah. So the next part of servicing this stuff, you saw me, I just cleaned that off. Now we're gonna check these clickers and see where Adam has them set so we can get them back to the same.
Oh gosh, you don't want to set them to where they were. I have no idea what's good. That's the thing.
So Adam basically had this compression backed all the way out. That was pretty much, the low speed was backed all the way out. I don't like to run anything with everything backed all the way out, because generally that means something's not right. so that's okay. But now we know it's backed out. Whatever. Because Adam didn't really know how to set it up or what, we're just gonna put them back in the middle. So it doesn't matter. But now that we're getting ready to, we're gonna take some more stuff apart and clean. But we're gonna kind of getting ready to go back together. We're gonna back all the clickers all the way out, because you want it to be able, when you're bleeding these things, you want to be able to get the oil to flow through as easy as possible. So
I was looking through the manual, and the manual had, like, it wasn't in the middle. It was more like closer to 2/3 of the way. So when you're setting it up, like when you have it revalved, you want it to be in the middle so you have adjustability be up and down. But yeah, why are the stock values, like, let's say it's 36 or 26 clicks or something, why is it like 20 clicks instead of?
It has a lot to do actually with what the bike was built for. Like, so this is an XCW. Mm-hmm. It was built mainly for the rocks and the trails and the whatever. If it were an SX, obviously it would have a different shock on it, but because it was linkage for this year. But their stock values in the book would be way different, because it was set up. So the reason it was like that is because they build these things very generically, like at the factory, because they have to, right? Because they have to just slam these things together, right? Like they can't take this and be like, oh, and call the customer before they deliver the new bike. It just wouldn't make any sense. So they got to, like, generically build these things kind of sort of okay, and then a lot of times what they'll do is they'll go too far out for the settings, right? So it's soft. So as you can, if the guy's actually fast or riding hard, they can click in and it makes sense. If you put them in the middle, they may not be able to get enough clicks out of it, and they may be unhappy. The other thing is, it depends on where, like, these are Austrian, right? Europe has a lot of sand, so they test these bikes in sand, and so it's a lot of things I've learned over the years dealing with this stuff, like where a bike is built, like country-wise, has a lot to do, and where they test has a lot to do with what the thing is set up with from the get-go. In fact, if you buy a European motorbike, KTM or whatever, they're going to be set up for sand also. Like it's because they have a ton of sand over there that they race on. So they don't work that good in our, like, hard edge, choppy braking bump tracks that, like, in the US. So they got to valve the suspension. So yeah, when they set it up from the factory, they're going to set it kind of sort of in the middle. Like the valving will be kind of in the middle, and they're, like I said, this is super one-dimensional. I wish I had a normal like valve stack laid out, because it's crazy how different this is from like what we would have. It's very, very one-dimensional, and we're gonna pull this off here in just a second. So let's see, what size is that? Not that.
So they're using the same suspension with the strut in the back, right? But they put it on different types of bikes for different types of riding, and that's why one of them is adjusted higher up in the clicker range than the other one.
Right.
So that they could use the same part pretty
Right.
much.
So it's way cheaper, right?
Yeah. And okay, so that would make sense. Why? Because I was really curious about that, because I thought I was under the impression that when you're trying to figure out where to go in the clickers, you set it to neutral and then work up from there. And you're saying that's not the case because the valving wasn't set up to be neutral for that kind of terrain.
Right.
So that's why you have to adjust it with the clickers.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like they in like, you know, the 300, I'm sure I haven't looked at their build sheets in a while, but my guess is a 300 is going to be will have the same stack as a 250 as the 125 as long as it had the PDS. Different springs on it, different clicker settings for, you know, whatever. But again, they got to mass produce these things, right? They just got to jam them out. And having them all different, like, would be really hard.
That makes sense. Because that confused me, because I noticed that in the manual, the front ones were kind of middle, but the rear, I was like questioning why.
Why would it be so
Why
far?
am I clicking like 20-some clicks when it's like 26 clicks or something?
Right.
Yeah, oh yeah, learning something new.
So we're just cleaning this valve out. I'm not going to go super crazy because it's actually pretty good.
Like I said, my brain is just going a million miles an hour, and I'm getting all these questions. But one of the questions that I have for Morgan is when you are on the throttle, okay, so you have weight transfer when you're on the throttle and you go back, so that's compressing the suspension. But what about if you take that weight transfer out of the equation and you are just going throttle down, and you have all the torque from the engine? Does that compress your suspension?
It does. It absolutely, as the sprocket turns, right, and it pulls that chain, it loads the suspension, right? If you're here, let's look at it just real fast. I mean, just a quick visual. This is obviously not connected to that. I mean, it's connected by a chain, but it's a different moving part. The swing arm's back here. When this thing torques, you go on the gas, torques, it's going to pull this chain, which is going to lift this wheel, which is going to load the suspension, which is an interesting thing. I told Adam to grab the camera because you've seen all my videos, riding videos, whatever. There's a guy who was watching those who sent me a private message, and he said, more or less, hey dude, quit blipping the throttle, you're screwing up your suspension. And I'm like, what? He's like, dude, I watch your videos. It's all fun. What? It sounds neat. Yap. He's like, but you're upsetting the suspension every time you do that. And I'm like, huh. He's like, think about it like a mechanic. Think about it like an engineer. When you go off and on, it's changing the suspension. So if you go off the gas and then back, or on the gas, loads it, and then back off the gas, it unloads it, and then back on the gas and loads it. It completely upsets the suspension. And he's like, stop that. You're driving me nuts. Easier, smoother on the throttle, and you're going to find that the bike is going to handle way better. I'm like, what? Sure enough, I go out next ride. I really focus on that in my head. Like, just be smooth on the throttle. Don't be so freaking jerky on the throttle because it sounds neat. I mean, honestly, that's probably why I was doing it the most is because it sounded cool. Like, it sounds fast. Started slowing down and smoothing out the throttle. Bike worked a million times better. Then I started finding that, especially on 300s, you can ride a gear high, which then forces you to be smoother on the throttle, right? Because you can't wrap. It won't do that. It settles the whole chassis down. Just calms the whole thing down. And you get into a big rock garden, if you can ride that gear high and lug that bike but keep the power on, it'll through it. Versus, you're down a gear, and the bike's all over the place. So you can actually do a lot of suspension tuning with your right wrist. by just being smooth on the throttle. And it turns out he actually was Jason Anderson's coach in New Mexico, so he knows what the hell's going on. He ended up, coaching a guy who's now a Supercross champion and a super badass, and it was crazy the difference it made in my riding. And I still get caught up doing I have to remind myself sometimes to just be smoother on the throttle. But every time you change that input, it completely changes the back of the bike. So yeah. This is a lot to think about. We're just going to take this off and clean it all really good.
When I first started riding, I had no idea that there are all these different types of bikes for different types of riding.
Right.
I had no idea there's a difference between a motocross bike and like a trail bike, or I thought it was all the same.
Yeah. It's just now they're starting, like Beta and Sherco, they're starting to build bikes specifically for hard enduro. We're getting closer to it, right? It's not 100% but it's getting there. They're coming. The Erzberg edition, right? I mean, not that it's hugely different. They still work on them if you're going to be a pro, but it's a big deal that's a separate motorcycle now, and all these disciplines are just going to breed more motorcycles, which is cool. I think it's really neat. It's unfortunate because it means guys like me who like to have lots of things means they just got to own more motorcycles. But another thing, guys, to check is the bushing inside there. Let me see if I can shine a light. So, there you go. It's that orange part in there. That is the bushing. You want to make sure that is good. I've had all kinds of questions recently about how to change those without screwing it up. And because it's a thing. And the answer I have is you just got to be real careful. There's no that I know of super cool tool to get in there, but you get in from this side, you got to take everything out of here. You can hear from this side with a real small little drift and just be really careful. Tap, 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 and drive that bushing out. Now to go in is a lot easier. Do bushing. I usually use the vise, and I'll just take a socket and run the vise and push it in there. It's no big deal. Now I'm using a little bit of assembly lube on everything to make it smooth. Then we got our bullet here so actually before I do that, I'm gonna clean this up because why not? What was it that made you decide to ride dirt bikes?
What was it that made me decide to
good.
ride dirt bikes? I had a coworker that I work with that we would hang out and go to his house, and I see he's got bikes everywhere, scattered in the kitchen, in the living room, in the garage, and he just really talked up dirt biking, and I never thought I'd be on two wheels. Never, avoided motorcycles, and I don't know, it's just a really cool dude, and I really looked up to him, and I'm like, I'll give it a shot. And
here you are.
I got a KLX 250. Was my first bike. I rode on it once, and then I found the KDX 220, which is what he was recommending I should get, and I tried that bike out. I'm like, so this is what a two-stroke is. So I bought that one the next week, and I'm like, all downhill from there. So
nice. I love it. That's awesome. It's interesting how people end up. I ended up in the sport because I wanted a dirt bike from the time I was a tiny child, but my parents were like, no way, no how, no, you're not doing it. And I'm like, anyway, whatever. I lived in the city. It didn't make sense. Fast forward, graduated from college, finally had a job where I actually made some money. I was like, okay, I can afford a dirt bike, so I went and bought one. And it's the same thing before this, my recreation was all mountaineering, climbing, ice climbing, rock climbing, mountain biking, whatever. I wasn't just obviously I wanted a dirt bike, but I definitely wasn't against motors. I just didn't ever do it. And so I finally bought one, and my life slowly spiraled into what it is now. I finally quit climbing. Whatever. I've gotten back into fly fishing now. Finally, it's been a long time since I've done that avidly, and it was just an interesting thing. The dirt bikes just take over your brain like no other sport I've ever done.
It's been the most addicting thing I've ever tried, because I was big into tracking my car. like doing track days, and and even like there was a little series that I raced, the 86 Cup with the DRZs and FRSs, and what I really liked about going out to the track is you get in the zone, you're in a flow state. Yeah. And I get that from snowboarding. You just super laser focused, and I went dirt biking. I'm like, man, I get in the flow so much faster and so much longer. Yeah. And it's a lot cheaper. And and then I just love like just being out there and you're by yourself. It's therapeutic, and I had no idea it was so physically demanding too. No idea. And I thought I was in pretty good shape. I worked out a lot, and then I got on a dirt bike and it just whooped my ass. Like nothing ever has. And I just a ton of respect. And then racing them,
it's nuts. It's
unbelievable. All right, so we got sidetracked talking about different types of racing and how many spectators there are within like motocross, supercross, and then your off-road races. And I do want to mention something. We were talking about how things are televised versus like Baja 1000, and the U.S. Hard Enduro Series this year did a phenomenal job televising the whole series, or documenting it and posting it on YouTube. And I really encourage you to check it out. It's a U.S. Hard Enduro Series, I believe is what it is on YouTube. Yeah. And you get to see the story and experience the race, and it's giving me goosebumps. But they did an amazing job. It's really cool, really worth checking out. And if you can't make it to the races, definitely check out the videos, and hopefully it'll encourage more people to go out riding and racing and help the sport grow. And it's really cool.
I think hard enduro is going to be a discipline that's going to grow the sport. I think honestly, we used to have a little race series we put on. It was like an enduro cross kind of thing with a friend of mine, and it's hard for those race promoters, and I feel desperately for them, because you go to one race and it wasn't hard enough, right, for the pros, or it was too hard for there's a lot of complaining that happens. Not too much, but it happens, and it's really frustrating. But I think it's cool that hard enduro, they're doing a good job of like nowadays, because it was, everything was just freaking crazy hard, right? Like, because there's one course for the whole damn thing. Now it's like they're making it better, and I think that's going to really help the sport grow, is if they can like get the little kids in, right? So make it a hard enduro course for 50s, so it's not, it's not crazy huge logs, is whatever. I think that in combination with more people noticing it, the YouTube channel, things like that, will help grow that sport, which then helps grow our sport, right? The off-road motorcycle sport, which we're all in this together, which I wish more people would be like that. Like we could all just come together over dirt bikes, and to heck with everything else in the world. We just talk about dirt bikes, and that'd be awesome. Because the more people you can get out there doing it, the better it is. And like our local series, the Weeby series, does a great job with their, it's a hare scramble series, and they do a great job with the kids course. They have like kind of almost, there's like a kids course, and then there's the C course, and then there's everybody else's course. So they put a lot of effort. It's a ton of effort as a promoter to build 3 tracks, right? And now the C course isn't a separate track. It just cuts off some of the harder A stuff, but like it's just still a ton of work. And that to me is what's going to grow this thing. And I'd love to see hard enduro do a little bit more of that. Like have you've got the West, and then you've got the US Hard Enduro, whatever they're called, and then it'd be cool to see some other. And I know there are. I know there are.
Oh gosh, here we go. The SEER races.
Yeah,
Southeast Extreme Racing. They put on awesome races.
Yeah, and more of that, and bringing it down a level so that it's not so. Because that's the problem with Supercross, for instance. There are no easy Supercross tracks. Most people who race Supercross are thrown into it. Like, it's a deep, deep pool, and they get thrown right into the middle of it if they're really, really good at other things. Because there's no easy, it's really crazy discipline. There's no, low-range Supercross. It's like they have the futures, and then it's full-on professional Supercross. Mm. So hard enduro, and it's cool. Like I said, these smaller organizations putting on races, it's cool that they're not so hard. I like that. Like, some people get all mad, it's not that hard. Well, if you want to go do the hard stuff, enter the pro class in the freaking, whatever. Like, if you want to do this, but let some people who are not so good get into it slowly, because that will then, like I said, grow the sport. They may never ever race a really, really hard one, and that's okay, because they're having fun. They're supporting the sport by buying t-shirts, going to races, you know, watching YouTubes, all those things. That's what we need. You know, that's what we need for this sport, is more of that. And like, if like when I go to a Supercross race, I'm like, I mean, I love it, but there's no way I'm doing a triple. I'm not jumping an 80-foot triple. Like, that's never happening. I'm not going to buy the gear that looks like those guys. I'm not, you know, whatever. I'm not going to buy a bike like those guys. That's never happening. But if my kids watch some guy crawl up some gnarly rocky thing and then they go do something that looks like that to them, oh, so then now they're buying 100% goggles because Graham wears them, or, you know, whatever, shot gear. You know, like, that's what grows this thing. And I think it's really cool that discipline's happening.
Yeah. For sure, and I just want to add a couple things to that, because with hard enduro, what I think is super cool is that you get to race, especially on the courses for like the hot laps, which determine the starting order. You get to race the same course as the pros, and some of the races, it's the entire course is the same as the pros, and then they're lapping you, and it's just a different type of environment and dynamic, and it definitely grows the sport, because so people that ride hard enduro. If you're riding it long enough, you start realizing that that riders that have experience on trials bikes are a lot better. So I think it's growing the trials sport as well. And I don't know, I'm starting to get well versed, so I'm going out to the motocross track so I can learn turns, you know, so I could go faster. And I think it definitely helps it grow. And then people are just out riding together and trying to learn from each other. And no, I think it's all about dirt bikes, and I think what I like about hard enduro is it kind of brings all the different elements together, because you'll have guys that run GNCC that will go and race the hard enduros, or you'll have trials bike riders. So I'm thinking Jordan Ashburn for GNCC, or Pat Smaggi for trials, and they'll race the hard enduros. And Ryan Sipes, you got Taylor Robert, you got people that want that challenge and want to see where they could go. And it's even if you're not going for a title, just to be able to challenge yourself and see where you're riding at right now. And this is something really cool, is when you go to a hard enduro and then you go back to your local riding spot and you try riding it, it's just unbelievable. You have the experience in the hard enduro, you're constrained by the ribbons and the tape, you're pushed outside of your comfort zone. You go back to your normal riding area and you're like, wow, this is so much easier, and you have so much more fun.
Yeah. And new lines develop, new things become fun, right? Because you know, like I said, you're constrained by ribbons in an event, and you go back home, it's like, oh, well, look at that rock. I never even thought about going over that rock, and I went over 10 of them, you know, last weekend. So it opens up everything. It makes your riding area bigger, especially if it's a place like we have. Peach Valley has a whole bunch of open areas that you don't have to stay on trails. You can go practice all that stuff you just did, you know, and it's super cool. Really, really cool. All right, guys, back to work. So now we're going to put this thing back together. We got this all nice and cleaned up. New piston bands, new O-rings underneath them. Those O-rings help to seal those piston bands. What happens is when the old O-rings start to get flat, and the bushings start to wear out, they collapse, and when they do that, they still move through, and obviously they haven't done any damage, but they'll let oil bypass, and so it's not damping properly. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So the way we do it with TBT is we're going to build all this dry. I'll go ahead and put just a tiny bit of lube, and you can use shock oil for this too, but this stuff works good. Really, really, really want to clean it all. Everything together before you go together. Clean everything up really well before you go together, because really gnarly races last year that were I was racing that thing at like 12,000 feet through just nasty. Like this one enduro we had was so hard. It was just an enduro, but it was brutal what they had us going through. And I took that 125 up this trip. It was out of hand. I'm like, this year I gotta race something bigger. I'm too fat for a 125, but So I want to build this 300 into like a wicked race bike that I can take hard enduro to, keep it super light, like no lights, no nothing, just like a race bike. So guys, filling this thing like this, when you're doing that, you gotta keep your hand over this, otherwise you will get oil all over your face.
So how'd you get into working on bikes?
That's a great question. I was too broke to pay someone, basically. Like when I got into riding, I was doing construction. So I was making decent money, but I didn't have much. I was still a young kid, 26, didn't have a lot going on, and so I honestly, it's basically started one Sunday. I got a flat and on my dirt bike, and I didn't know how to change it. I had a friend that I rode with, and I called him, like, I got a flat, can't ride today. He's like, what do you mean you can't ride? Just change the flat. Same kind of thing, right? And I'm like, and he's like, dude, I'm like, I don't know how to change the flat. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know how to do it. He's like, you're an idiot. Let's go. I'm coming over. And so I come over, he's like, all right, we're building a stand. So we built a stand out of wood. He's like, you're a carpenter, right? I'm like, yeah. He's like, make it, knock these two boards together. Okay, good. He's like, all right, put that thing up there. Let's get the thing. He's like, do you have some tools? I'm like, kinda. So he helps me get the wheel off. He's got tire irons, takes the thing apart, gets it all. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting there. Gets the whole thing done, and we go ride, and I'm like, well, that wasn't that bad. And he's like, yeah, what's wrong with you? I'm like, so from then on, I'm kind of a hammer. Like, I describe my riding style as a hammer. I'm not very good or delicate with anything. I just so I break a lot of stuff, and I was breaking a lot of stuff, and I really I just could not afford to fix it. So I was learning, gotta take the high speed, we're gonna drop this in here. The bubbles are not all out yet, we're not done. So my friends kept helping me fix things, and I realized, like, pretty quickly that I liked working on the bike as much as I liked riding it. I was like, God, this is fun. And a lot of satisfaction with fixing something and then going out and riding it and actually having it be fixed. Like, oh, this is how we get the rest of the bubbles out. Set it out of the way.
Why?
I don't know why 10. That's what KTM specs is. You just want 10. I mean, well, I have a theory. So 10 millimeters down comes down 10 mil, and then what that does is gives you enough oil capacity there to fill everything, right? And so it's not flat against there. There's plenty of oil, but it gives you most of this chamber full of nitrogen to allow that to move quite a bit. If theoretically, let's say you brought that piston down to here, way down here, you put just like this little tiny amount of nitrogen in there, you would hydrolock that thing because it couldn't move out fast enough. And if you had it all the way up, you might still have some bubbles residing in there that you couldn't bleed out. So this way, we got plenty of oil in here to get all the bubbles out and still get the piston where we need to be. So look at things. See, there's a lot less bubbles coming out now. All right, guys, we're gonna put nitrogen in this. Be right back, and I'll show you how we check to make sure everything's good. All right, guys, we're gonna check this. Just like all other shocks, I'm gonna push down like that. Make sure I don't feel anything weird. Then bring it up, just like that. No air in it. We're all good to go. That is going to conclude the rebuilding part of this video. So I'm gonna leave the camera running because Adam and I have been having a fun time talking about all kinds of stuff. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us for the shock part. If that's all you watch, I appreciate it. If you even think about it, consider subscribing to the channel. We do a ton of this. Also, make sure you go check out Adam's. It's called Adam Does Dirt Bikes. It's super, super fun. Yeah, it's a great channel. Make sure I'll put a link in the description too. So anyway, I'm gonna put this thing back together. We'll keep talking. As you learn things, whatever, start trying to make some improvements. Some First Cadillac told me one time when I was asking him how to go faster. For instance, he raced factory Kawasaki, factory Husqvarna factory Can-Am back when Can-Am was a thing.
So he raced the KDXs? Or?
Oh yeah.
I think you might have told me about it.
I probably did.
Yeah.
And when I asked him how to go faster, he's like, dude, buy tires and gas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I can't tell you. You got to ride. Ride the damn motorcycle. Kind of bounce up and down. You can, if you want, if you can stand up, keep your. Okay. Good. And hop off. I mean, I try to stand up the whole time as far as like, you know, charging, but like a big gnarly hill or something like that, I'm like, I get lazy and I sit down. Mm-hmm. And if I run normal sag, it tends to do this too much to the bike because I don't normally sit down. It tends to do this too much to the bike, and the front end gets light going up that stuff. So I run a little more preload, knowing that the rest of the time my bike might be a little front heavy. But in those situations, it keeps weight on the front tire.
That makes sense. So that's like. I'm curious. Like, I don't know if you'd be if you share, but I'm curious. Like, sure. How did dirt bikes change your life?
It was like I just was miserable, but I would get on my dirt bike and go ride, and everything was okay. I went to school, got me out of doing construction. Went to school, got back in it, fell or whatever. Moved over here, started this shop. It's whatever. Made really, really horrible decisions in my life. Really drinking a lot. And the shop, which is completely surrounded, centered around dirt bikes, is what kept me getting up in the morning. It's been one of those things. Like, I tell people that have struggled with it, with alcohol or other substance abuse, it's like, I don't know. You got to find something bigger. Whew. Right on, guys. I hope you guys liked that video. Like I said, Adam and I had a ton of fun that day. It was really cool. I think we got to know each other a lot better. It was so much fun. So I hope you had fun. If there's any of that stuff you guys want to hear more about, there at the end, I kind of started talking about a little more personal stuff about my life, about how I believe that motorcycles saved my life. Talked a little bit about my faith, talked about why I quit drinking, things like that. Not all that's on there, but if you guys want to hear more of that, please let me know. Comment below, shoot me an email at morgan@highland-cycles.com. Let me know. I'll make the rest of that video. I'll put the rest of that conversation in there. There's lots of other conversations we had during the day that were really great. I just couldn't fit into this video, so maybe I'll put those up later. I don't know. Guys, I really hope that you enjoyed that. I love you guys. And I hope that this video series inspires you guys to, I don't know, maybe meet new people, get together, and connect over dirt bikes!